What's the most obscene display of private wealth you've ever witnessed? My ex's dad's semi-daily driver was an Aston Martin Vanquish. They lived in a multi-million-dollar home, rented entire homes, condos all around the world for multiple family vacations each year, and my ex's private high school tuition cost double what my college tuition cost. His parents paid out of pocket for he and his two siblings to go to very expensive colleges. He had multiple trust funds and investments, and they were perfectly wonderful people, all of them. Very family oriented, very kind, as generous as they were wealthy. They endowed scholarships, worked hard, gave great advice, gave to charity, and were always attempting to learn and observe the world around them and changing their views accordingly. Great family. Saddest part of the breakup for me was breaking up with the rest of the family tbh. I have to know why it didn't work out. I could see past a lot of faults for that kind of comfort financially. Quirky 1. I have a regular day job, but I also teach English as a second language to Gulf nationals, in particular Saudi families. I receive a lot of gifts, but one boy I tutored came from a family who owned some of the most expensive racing camels in the Gulf. The father buys and sells these animals that are over 6 figures. When the son graduated, the father allowed me to choose a camel that would be mine, and designated as not for sale. I have a racing camel in Saudi Arabia that lives probably in better conditions than I do. Family I know bought the $3 million house next door so they could knock it down for a tennis court. The CEO of Oracle bought every single house at the beach he lived at so he could turn it into a private beach. I used to be an optician in a very high-end optical shop. I had a customer spend $15K on glasses in 1 hour. He was wearing overalls covered in paint and dirt. No one else wanted to help him. I approached and began to help him when he decided he wanted to look at Cartier glasses. The Cartier case is always locked and the key is in the owner's office. So I politely excused myself and on my way to retrieve the key, my co-workers were warning me to be careful. He just wants to steal the eyewear. My co-workers were all dumbfounded when I walked to the back to ring up his order on the credit card machine. As I asked how do I ring up $14,995, manager's mouth dropped to the floor. Turns out customer is Andre Rieu. Best commission check ever. And I still hold the company record for highest sale, so I'm told. I heard a similar story. My neighbor was a real estate agent in Florida. He said a long-haired hippie came walking in the office with dirty jeans and a shirt and no one wanted to help him. A new kid on the job was forced to help the dirty hippie who turned out to be Greg Allman. He ended up buying a penthouse suite. Lived in the international dorms in college. First week of school move-in happens and you get to meet a bunch of people. One of the people I met was this girl from Singapore. She's pretty cool and whatnot, but after a few weeks she realizes that to get around she needs a car, as public transport blows. So, naturally, she calls her parents to tell them that she needs a car. No biggie. She tells them that she needs a Mercedes S-Class. Okay, nice. But remember, she's from Singapore. If you know anything about Singapore, it's that cars cost anywhere from 6-9x what they do in the US. Casually, her parents wire her enough money to get an S-Class. In Singapore, girl gets $650,000 wired to her account, not knowing that it costs 6x less here. She goes to the dealership, then comes back in an hour with no car. I asked her what happened, and she says, oh, it's getting delivered. Sure enough, 2 days later a brand new car shows up, except it's no S-Class. It's a Lamborghini Murcielago. Touché. Well played. I later find out she doesn't know how to drive, so she hired a chauffeur to drive her around. She would sit in the passenger side of her own Lambo and be driven places. What made it more hilarious was that the chauffeur would actually wear a black jacket and hat. Dang. I feel like the best thing about having a Lambo would be driving it. What a waste. We owned a karaoke service in Las Vegas. Got a call one day at 7:30 p.m. from a party planner we often worked with. They wanted us to be at the Venetian in 1.5 hours for a 4-hour event. Price is not an issue. We gave them a decent last-minute deal, $2,000. Turns out this was for a private gambling club. They had a special room with the big table games set up. Minimum buy-in just to attend was $500,000 actual cash on hand and another $500,000 line of credit. Minimum bet was $5,000 with no maximum. Most bets were $20k or more. A stack of $20 1,000 chips. I forgot to mention, there was also a $1 million membership fee. One time, lifetime, to get invited to these kinds of events. The smallest chip in the room was $100, and that's what they used for tipping. I made over $3,000 in tips that night, plus my pay of $2,000 in 4 hours. Rumor was that one guy lost $3.50 million in 4 hours. It's crazy when you get so rich that you treat $100 bills the same way as normal folks treat quarters. My dad's boss was the billionaire CEO of a Fortune 500 company. We were invited to his private 4th of July party at his home in Corona del Mar, where Robin Williams was hired to entertain, and he had his own fireworks barge anchored in the water just beyond the house. The fireworks alone cost more than $300k. Wouldn't be surprised if the whole party cost $500,000. P.S. Robin Williams' private comedy shows were not family friendly. During college I worked at a place selling very high-end patio furniture in the richest DC suburb. One day a Washington Redskin comes in and buys a custom patio furniture set for his deck and pool area. Total cost for 10 pieces was over $24,000. He paid cash and I set up delivery for 6 weeks later because the furniture had to be made at the manufacturer. 3 weeks later he was cut by the team. I called when the order came in and he said, "Oh, I'm in the Caribbean now. Think I'm selling that house 3. Think I'm going to retire. You like the furniture me? Yeah, him. You can have it. Thanks for being a fan." 14 years later and I still have that furniture and the fanciest patio set up in my middle class neighborhood. Guy from my town bought a helicopter. He had fallen out with his neighbor so decided to call his pilot at 4 a.m. and hover over his neighbor's house all night to annoy him. Someone in my town lives off the beaten path. In a small brick house. Nothing special, except there's a helipad and a helicopter behind it. I guess it's how you spend your money. I met the CEO of the company I work for and I complimented his watch. The first thing he did is take it off a day, let me wear it. Come to find out after doing a little research, the watch he was wearing is a Patek Philippe that cost $1.75 million. That watch alone cost more than every asset in my family for the past 4 generations. Holy frick, imagine if you somehow broke it. I went to a birthday party in 3rd grade. Every girl in the 3rd grade was invited. So 80 girls were picked up in limos, taken to Build-A-Bear where we could choose any bear. Then we all got manicures and pedicures. We went to Red Robin for dinner and limoed back to her mansion for a sleepover. I will never attend a party that fancy ever again. David Tepper, billionaire hedge fund manager that moved out of New Jersey. Doing this caused New Jersey to have redone their entire state budget. I work for a distribution power company. We have done multiple projects for a very wealthy customer who is more than happy to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to convert all the overhead power lines that surround his private house block to underground cables just for aesthetics. I was helping an owner rent his apartment, which is an investment property. It's a 2,500 square featuring condo with 4 balconies and 360-degree views of Midtown Eastern Manhattan, asking for $15,000 a month. Rented it for 6 months upfront with option to renew to someone who has ties to oil families in the Middle East. The person never moved in. At an airport in Sweden, a man comes up to me and says, "When is the next flight to Chicago?" I say, "Well, that would be tomorrow at 11 p.m. The last flight was about an hour ago." He goes, "Who do I talk to about getting a flight out of here today?" I was not sure whether he was joking or not, so I jokingly reply, "I guess you could charter your own 777 with a skeleton crew." He goes, "Yeah, let's do that." I reply, "That would be extremely expensive," and he goes, "That's okay. Who do I talk to?" I said, "Give me a minute," and called up the Ado. The call went something like this. Hey man, it's Mokorn. Yeah, listen man, there's a guy here who wants to charter his own 777 so he can get to Chicago tonight. What do I tell him?" "Yeah, he wants to go as soon as possible." Wait, we can do that. Really? Oh, okay, thanks. I then turn to the man and say, "Alright, they're making the calls and someone is on their way down here to coordinate." He goes, "Sounds good. Thank you." About 2 hours later, an empty 777 takes off. Destination Chicago. One of my dad's friends from high school is unbelievably rich and a collector. He owns a legitimate Stradivarius. Eventually, he decided he wanted to learn how to actually play it, so he signed up for lessons and brought a freaking Stradivarius with him down to the local music shop to meet his instructor and have his first lesson. I can only imagine the look on his instructor's face. You mean he didn't have the instructor come to him? How quaint. When I was living in Southern California, my buddy's dad was a therapist specializing in addiction. Needless to say, he made an absolute killing. He was a wealthy person that hated wealthy people, as in snobs, the country club types, people that own yachts to participate in a pee contest, etc. He paid to have a statue of a chicken made and put it directly in his front yard. This thing was not only fully painted and somewhere between 15-25 feet tall, it crowed loudly every day at sunrise. When I asked him why he had it, he simply said because my neighbors are yuppie dickheads. He simply said because my neighbors are yuppie dickheads. This is who I want to be. My last job before college was dealing with what they call the 1% now. We had a call from a customer who had spent a 5-figure sum for items for her house, and realized the house she had it sent to was not the house she wanted to decorate with them. After being informed the order was already in transit, she just reordered everything and had it rushed delivered to the house she wanted it for. She was totally cool with it. I always picture the basement of her one house having the duplicate sitting there, worth far more than what I made at that job in a year. My boss owns a $15+ million cottage. He likes to entertain and throws some pretty wild parties. His wealthy neighbors down the lake complained about the noise and frequently called police. One day they saw him on the street and told him smugly that they had a generous offer on their cottage and they were moving. "I know," said my boss. "I bought it. I sometimes wish I had frick you money." In summer of 1988 I was 16 and I went on a family trip to visit relatives in Cali, Colombia. One night, they took us on a drive around town to see the city at night. On the tour, we passed a 6 or 7-story office tower under construction in a residential neighborhood that my cousin told me was to be the future home of one of the city's largest narco traficantes, or drug kingpins. While the house was under construction, he'd had another large mansion built directly across the street so he could keep an eye on the building's progress from his home. Essentially, he built a mansion to live in while he watched his bigger mansion being built. Worked for a CEO that owned a vacation house in Park City, Utah. I was told it was $2 million. The house next to his came up for sale, and to prevent one of his friends that he didn't like from buying it, my CEO bought it. Shockingly, even though the company made record profits, we didn't do well enough for bonuses at the end of the year. Without even looking at the wine list, bring me a case, to start, of your most expensive Chardonnay, a few pitchers of Sprite, a few plates of lemons, and glasses of ice. These girls really like wine coolers. The wine was $550 per bottle of a Chassagne Montrachet, but I didn't charge them for the Sprite, ice, or lemons. And, yes, they proceeded to mix arguably the world's finest white wine with Sprite and lemons, then slugged it back over ice through straws. The guy was a pea producer and was celebrating an extremely good year in a restaurant in Austin where I worked. Tab ended up being almost $12K. He also was rocking a black, satin, Burt Reynolds jacket like it was still 1979. Eddie, that was the guy's name. I usually prefer mixed drinks too, but I would drink that wine straight. My dad got to fly on a guy's private jet for a day trip. They had a flight attendant serving mimosas, and when dad tried one he noticed it was particularly good, so he asked what champagne she was using. It was Dom Perignon. He politely asked her to skip the juice and serve it straight. I work in a shoe store. I once had a customer walk in and say give me one pair of every men's shoe in a size 10. Didn't want to try them on or look at them. He just needed some shoes for each of his houses. I work on commission so it was a huge sale for me. But holy frick, that was about 140 pairs of shoes. I would like to imagine this building the last few times this dude went to the lake house and had no shoes. Went to the cabin, no fricking shoes. Out to the summer home, and goddammit, he only wore flip-flops out there. Where are the son of a bee shoes? Goes to shoe store, and in a fit of shoe-induced rage, buys a lifetime supply of shoes. My boss was a military liaison in Dubai and told me a story about a guy he became friends with there. One night they are driving back from a night of debauchery in this guy's brand new Ferrari and it breaks down. He pulls over to the side of the road, gets out and starts walking while calling his people to come get him, bring him another car. He doesn't mention anything about the broken Ferrari, so my boss asks him about it. His response was, "What about it? It's broken. I'll just buy another." People have stupid amounts of money in Dubai. Dang. I'd be so tempted to ask if I could have the keys and title. Break that puppy down for parts and get a new house. My husband wrote a movie, long story, with a friend of his who is a full-time writer in Hollywood. Friend went to the house of a famous producer to pitch their script. He called my husband and said, "They have a Picasso." Husband is like, "Wow, very cool." Friend says, "The Picasso is in their parking garage." ETA, yes. A movie is a long story, and don't call me Shirley. ETA 2. I am in the US. Had no idea there is a small crappy car called a Picasso, but till. I work for a wealthy man and he once had me fly on a private jet to the other side of the country to pick up 6 perfect heirloom strawberries that cost $100 per 6 pack. They were placed in Chinese silk hand molded box so each strawberry wouldn't be jostled during the trip. He ate 3, gave me the rest for my trouble. Not gonna lie, it was the most amazing strawberry experience I have ever had. They probably cost him $25k all said and done between flights and my wage. Rich family custom built a house in downtown Toronto. The wife didn't want to see smoke detectors on the ceilings. So their solution? They bought an expensive $20k Vesta, very early smoke detection and aspiration system. This thing works by constantly drawing an air and sampling it for smoke levels via a series of pipes with holes in them ran all throughout the areas of coverage. Of course they don't want to see sampling tubes all over the ceiling either. So these people built a 6 inches chamber above their ceilings to house the Vesta sampling tube throughout the whole house. Plus everywhere there is a hole in the sampling tube drawing in air, there is a capillary connecting the tube to a hole in the ceiling, and it ends in a 1/4 thick disc. But they didn't even want to see that disc on the ceiling. So during construction they had the drywallers put a 1/4 layer of plaster on the ceiling of the entire house to make the ceiling flush with the capillary discs. They achieved what they wanted, with an absolutely bare ceiling, with just a tiny unnoticeable hole to draw in air. All that work, plus the fact that they require a fire alarm service company to come perform manual inspections on it, plus a few service calls for airflow problems and filter changes, just because they don't want to see any detectors on the ceiling. At least they spent all this money on a life safety device, but they could have achieved the same thing with a few interconnected smoke alarms. I work for a luxury home builder. Very big, very expensive houses. We are building a home for this guy and he calls freaking out at me because AT&T would only provide him with 9 DVRs when he needs 11. They would provide him with more, but he would need to open a second account to do so. I don't know why. I guess they had some kind of weird limit at the time. I'm the CTO of the home builder, so he expected me to get AT&T to change this policy so he could have a TV with DVR in every bathroom as well as the normal TV viewing rooms. I obviously couldn't do this, so he cancelled his contract with us through his lawyer and never spoke to us again. His deposit was non-refundable. In fact, we had already spent most of the money on the initial part of the build, so he walked away from over $100,000 we wouldn't give him back without ever saying a word to us. It was no biggie to him, I guess. It also made no sense. My boss once had me drive him to an exotic car dealership to pick up his new Bentley, 3 days after my paycheck had bounced. I had a friend whose sibling married someone in the British aristocracy. I was at their house and needed to pee, so my friend indicated towards the correct door. I went into the bathroom, and I swear to God, I got lost trying to find the toilet. But it was okay, because there were a lot of old Dutch Masters oil still lifes to look at in there. Sounds like the time my husband worked in someone's house and got lost just in the basement because it was such a huge house. I had an obscenely wealthy kid in my graduating class. His parents bought him a brand new Range Rover on his 16th birthday and he crashed it into a school bus. They got him a new one and he crashed it road racing. They got him a new one and he got a DUI and finally the police took away his license. Thank the Lord. A model, girl, my buddy used to date, spent like 10k on Clash of Clans for the lols. She doesn't even play games, just did it to display how rich she is. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.